The stars looked different in the Sigma 7 sector. Commander Vex Thara had been watching space for over 300 years, and she knew when something was wrong. Her purple skin rippled with concern as she stood on the bridge of the Zephyrian warship Eternal Glory. The massive vessel stretched for miles in every direction, its crystal hull gleaming with power from the quantum cores that hummed deep within. "Commander," called out Navigation Officer Keltar from his station. His forearms moved quickly over the light controls. "We have found something strange." Vexithera walked over to the main viewing screen. Her 6 legs made soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. The Zephyrians had evolved from creatures that looked like giant spiders, but millions of years of civilization had changed them. They now stood upright and wore flowing robes that showed their high rank in the Empire. "What is it?" she asked. "A ship, Commander, but it does not match any design in our records." The screen showed a vessel floating in the darkness of space. It was much smaller than their own ship, maybe only a few hundred meters long. The design looked rough and angular, like someone had built it quickly without caring about beauty. Thick metal plates covered its surface and strange tubes stuck out from various points. "Have you tried to contact them?" Vexithara asked. "Yes, Commander." No response. "The ship appears to be powered down, but our sensors detect life forms inside." Vexithara studied the strange vessel. In her long career, she had encountered dozens of new species. Most were primitive creatures who had barely learned to travel between planets. The Zephyrian Empire had been exploring space for over 50,000 years. They had built a civilization that spanned hundreds of star systems. Most alien species they met were so far behind that first contact usually ended with the aliens becoming part of the Empire. "What can you tell me about their technology?" she asked Science Officer Kethrin. Kethrin was younger than most of the crew, only about 100 years old. His green skin showed he came from one of the outer colonies. He looked nervous as he read from his instruments. "The ship uses very basic materials, Commander. Steel and iron alloys mostly. Their power source appears to be some kind of nuclear reactor. Very primitive compared to our quantum cores. Their weapons are also simple, what looks like chemical explosives and basic energy beams." Several crew members made soft clicking sounds with their mandibles. This was how Zephyrians laughed. The idea of using such old technology seemed funny to them. "Commander," said Tactical Officer Zilnith, "this ship poses no threat to us. Our shields could easily stop anything they might fire at us. Should we prepare a boarding party?" Vexithara considered this. Standard Imperial protocol was clear. When they found a new species, they would study them first. If the aliens were peaceful and useful, they might be allowed to join the Empire as a lower class. If they were hostile or had nothing to offer, they would be destroyed or enslaved. "Not yet," she said. "I want to know more about them first. Order the science vessel Luminous Tide to conduct a full deep scan of their ship and crew." The Luminous Tide moved closer to the strange vessel. It was much smaller than the Eternal Glory, built specifically for studying new worlds and species. Its advanced sensors could look deep inside any ship and learn everything about its technology and crew. As the science ship began its work, Vexithara noticed something odd about the alien vessel. Despite looking primitive, it had an unusual design philosophy. Every system seemed to have backup systems, and backup systems for those backup systems. The armor was much thicker than needed for the weapons they could detect. Strange tubes and vents covered the hull, as if the ship was designed to keep working even after taking heavy damage. "Commander," Kethrin called out, "the scan is revealing some interesting information. This species appears to call themselves humans. They come from a planet they call Earth in a system about 40 light-years from here. What else can you tell me about them?" "They are bipedal creatures similar to the Valdorians, but smaller. They appear to have only one head and 2 arms. Their technology is indeed very primitive, but—" Kethrin paused, looking confused at his readings. "But what?" "Commander, their computer systems contain vast amounts of data about warfare and military tactics, far more than we would expect from such a primitive species." Vexithara felt her first moment of unease. In all her centuries of service, she had never encountered a species that seemed so focused on war. Most civilizations that reached space travel had learned to live in peace, at least among their own kind. "What kind of warfare?" she asked. "Everything, Commander. Ground combat, naval battles, aerial warfare, and even space combat scenarios. Their databases contain detailed studies of thousands of different types of weapons and tactics." The bridge became quiet. Even the soft humming of the ship's system seemed louder in the silence. Perhaps they had to fight dangerous creatures on their homeworld, suggested Keltar. Some species need to be warlike to survive, but Vexithara was not convinced. She had seen warlike species before. They usually focused on simple, brutal tactics. These humans seemed to approach warfare like the Zephyrians approached science, with careful study and detailed planning. Continue the deep scan, she ordered. I want to know everything about these creatures before we make contact. Hours passed as the luminous tide worked. The more information they gathered, the more confused the Zephyrian crew became. The human ship was called the UES Indomitable, and according to its records, it was classified as a light cruiser in something called the United Earth Navy. Commander, Kethrin said, his voice shaking slightly, I am finding records of conflicts these humans have fought. The numbers are disturbing. Show me. The main screen filled with images and data from the human databases. Vexithara saw pictures of battles fought with primitive weapons, swords, spears, and bows. Then more advanced conflicts with gunpowder weapons that filled battlefields with smoke and death. The progression continued through wars fought with increasingly deadly weapons. This conflict here, Kethrin pointed to one set of data. They call it World War I. Over 17 million beings died. And this one, World War II, killed over 70 million. The bridge crew made sounds of shock and disbelief. The entire Zephyrian Empire had not lost that many people in all of its 50,000 years of expansion. How long ago were these conflicts? Vexithara asked. According to their calendar, less than 200 of their years ago. Commander, they have been fighting major wars constantly throughout their recorded history. Vexithara stared at the data scrolling across the screen. War after war, conflict after conflict. These humans seemed to fight everyone. Other groups of humans, alien creatures on their world, and even themselves over ideas and resources. What about their current status? She asked. Are they still fighting wars? The data suggests they have achieved a form of planetary unity, but they maintain large military forces. This ship appears to be part of a fleet designed to project power across interstellar distances according to their military doctrine. Project power? Zilneth asked. You mean they plan to fight wars in space? It appears so, yes. The implication slowly sank in. Most species the Zephyrians encountered were either too primitive for space travel, or had advanced beyond the need for large militaries. These humans seemed to be bringing their warlike nature with them to the stars. Commander, the communications officer announced, we are receiving a transmission from the Imperial High Command. They want a full report on the alien contact within the next standard cycle. Vexithara nodded. The High Command would expect her to follow standard procedure, evaluate the aliens, and then either integrate them into the Empire or eliminate them if they posed a threat. But something about these humans made her hesitate. Sir, Keltar said quietly, what are your orders regarding first contact? She looked at the image of the human ship on the screen. It looked so small and primitive compared to their massive vessel. But the data they had collected suggested these humans might be unlike any species they had encountered before. Continue the deep scan, she said finally. I want to understand exactly what we are dealing with before we make any contact. Something tells me these humans are going to surprise us. As the luminous tide continued its work, Vexithara could not shake the feeling that this encounter would be different from all the others. In the past, finding a new species had been a routine matter. This time, she sensed they might be opening a door that could never be closed again. The human ship continued to drift silently in space, its crew unaware that they were being studied by an alien civilization. But deep in its computer systems lay the records of humanity's long and bloody history. And those records were about to teach the Zephyrians that there were some things in the universe more dangerous than advanced technology. The stars in Sigma 7 looked different indeed. They were about to witness the first meeting between a peaceful galactic empire and a species that had turned warfare into an art form. The deep scan had been running for 6 hours when Science Officer Kethrin made a discovery that changed everything. He was sitting at his station aboard the luminous tide, surrounded by screens showing data from the human ship. What he found in the deeper computer files made his green skin turn pale. Commander Vexithara, he called over the communication system, his voice shaking. You need to see this immediately. Within minutes, Vexithara had transported over to the science vessel. She found Kethrin staring at his screens with wide eyes, his forearms moving frantically over the controls. "What have you discovered?" she asked. "Commander, these humans, they have detailed records of every method of killing ever invented on their world." Vexithera looked at the screen. The human database contained thousands of files, each describing different ways to fight and kill. But these were not simple weapon descriptions. They were detailed studies with drawings, explanations, and improvement suggestions. "Show me," she said. Catherine opened a file labeled Infantry Combat Manual. The screen filled with images of human soldiers using various weapons. But what shocked Vexithera was not the weapons themselves, but how carefully everything was explained. "Look at this," Catherine said, pointing to a section about something called combined arms tactics. They have learned to use different types of weapons together to maximize damage. Ground troops work with flying vehicles and long-range weapons in carefully planned attacks. Vexithera read the text on the screen. The humans had created detailed plans for attacking enemy positions. They used artillery to destroy defenses, aircraft to attack from above, and infantry to capture ground. Every piece worked together like parts of a machine designed for destruction. "This is just one manual," Catherine continued. "There are hundreds more. Naval warfare, aerial combat, siege tactics, guerrilla fighting, urban combat, mountain warfare, desert warfare, Arctic warfare, jungle warfare, space combat." "Space combat?" Vexithera interrupted. "But they have only just reached the stars." "Yes, but they have already created detailed theories about how to fight in space. Look at this file." The screen showed diagrams of spacecraft firing weapons at each other. The humans had thought about how to attack enemy ships, how to defend their own vessels, and how to fight battles across entire star systems. "Commander," Catherine said quietly, "they have been thinking about space warfare since before they even left their home planet." Vexithera felt a chill run through her body. The Zephyrians had achieved space travel 50,000 years ago, but they had rarely needed to fight space battles. Most conflicts were settled through diplomacy, or the simple threat of their superior technology. These humans seemed to assume that reaching space meant more opportunities for war. "What else have you found?" she asked. Catherine opened another section of the database. Historical analysis of their major conflicts. "Commander, the scale of their warfare is beyond anything we have encountered." The screen showed maps of human battles. In one conflict they called the Siege of Stalingrad. Over 2 million people had fought in a single city. The battle lasted for months, with humans fighting for every building, every street, every room. "They turned an entire city into a battlefield," Catherine explained. "But look at this, they documented everything. Every tactic that worked, every mistake that was made, every lesson they learned. They studied their failures and improved their methods." Vexithera looked at more files. In a battle called D-Day, humans had launched an invasion across water, using thousands of ships and aircraft to attack heavily defended positions. The planning had taken years, and they had considered every possible problem. "They planned for soldiers getting seasick during the attack," Catherine said, pointing to one document. "They created special equipment for fighting on beaches. They even practiced the invasion multiple times before actually doing it. But the most disturbing files were about something called asymmetric warfare. These described how weaker forces could fight stronger enemies using surprise attacks, sabotage, and psychological warfare. "Look at this manual on guerrilla tactics," Catherine said. "It explains how a small group of fighters can defeat a larger, better equipped army by using hit-and-run attacks, destroying supply lines, and turning the local population against the enemy." Vexithera read the file with growing concern. The humans had written detailed instructions on how to fight enemies with better technology. They had studied how to hide from advanced sensors, how to attack supply convoys, and how to make occupying territory too expensive for an enemy to maintain. "They have manuals for fighting more advanced civilizations," she realized. "Yes, Commander. And look at this section on total war." The screen showed documents describing conflicts where entire civilizations had dedicated every resource to destroying their enemies. Factories had been converted to make weapons. Civilians had been trained as soldiers. Entire populations had been moved to support the war effort. In their Second World War, Catherine explained, they mobilized over 100 million people for combat. Their entire planet became focused on the war effort. Vexithera tried to imagine her own people fighting such a conflict. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that required such dedication. Their wars were usually short affairs, settled quickly through superior technology or diplomatic pressure. What about their weapons technology? She asked. Catherine opened another section. Commander, they have developed weapons specifically designed to cause maximum suffering. The files showed weapons that Vexithara had never imagined. Chemical weapons that attacked the respiratory system. Biological weapons that spread disease. Incendiary weapons that burned everything they touched. Nuclear weapons that could destroy entire cities. They use nuclear weapons against their own species, Catherine said, his voice barely a whisper. They dropped 2 of these bombs on cities full of civilians to end a war. Vexithara stared at the images of destroyed cities. The humans had developed weapons powerful enough to kill hundreds of thousands of people instantly, and they had actually used them. But Commander, Catherine continued, that is not the worst part. Look at what happened next. The screen showed how the humans had continued developing even more powerful nuclear weapons after the war ended. They had created bombs thousands of times more powerful than the ones used on the cities. 2 groups of humans had pointed these weapons at each other for decades, threatening to destroy their entire planet. They called it mutually assured destruction, Catherine explained. The idea was that both sides would be completely destroyed if anyone started a war, so no one would dare to attack first. They were willing to risk destroying their entire species to maintain peace? Yes, Commander. And it worked. The threat was so terrible that neither side dared to attack. Vexithara felt sick. These humans had created weapons that could end their civilization, and then used the threat of using those weapons as a diplomatic tool. What happened to end this standoff? She asked. One side's government collapsed, but they kept most of the weapons. Many other human nations have since developed nuclear weapons as well. Commander, there are currently enough nuclear weapons on their planet to destroy their entire civilization several times over. The bridge crew of the Luminous Tide had gathered around the screens, listening in horrified fascination. Officer Pelnix, who had served in the Imperial Navy for over 2 centuries, spoke first. Commander, in all my years of service, I have never encountered a species that developed such destructive capabilities and continued to exist. Most species either destroy themselves or learn to live peacefully, agreed Communications Officer. Yelland, these humans seem to have chosen a third path, living with the constant threat of destruction. Vexithara continued reading through the files. She found training manuals that taught human soldiers to fight in every possible environment. Urban combat guides that explained how to clear buildings room by room. Survival manuals that taught soldiers to live behind enemy lines for months. They have manuals for psychological warfare, Catherine pointed out. Techniques for breaking enemy morale, spreading fear, and turning enemy populations against their own governments. The files describe propaganda techniques, torture methods, and ways to recruit enemy soldiers to change sides. The humans had studied the mental aspects of warfare as carefully as the physical aspects. Commander, called out sensor technician Krival from her station, I am detecting some unusual activity from the human ship. Vexithara looked at the tactical display. The human vessel, which had been drifting quietly for hours, was showing signs of increased activity. What kind of activity? Power fluctuations, Commander. It appears they are coming out of whatever low-power state they were in. Have they detected our scans? Unknown, Commander, but their weapon systems are starting to power up. Vexithara looked back at the screens full of human military data. After learning about their approach to warfare, the thought of these humans preparing their weapons made her very nervous. Continue monitoring them, she ordered. But prepare our ships for defensive action if necessary. As the crew prepared for possible conflict, Vexithara realized that everything had changed. They were no longer dealing with a primitive species that could be easily controlled. These humans had spent thousands of years learning how to fight and kill. They had turned warfare into a science, and now they were waking up. Commander Vexithara ordered the scan to go even deeper into the human databases. What the crew found next would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Hidden within the military files were personal records, interviews with human soldiers, psychological profiles, and training videos that showed how these creatures actually thought about war. Commander, Catherine called out, his voice trembling, I have accessed their personnel files. These contain recorded interviews with human military leaders. Show me, Vexithara replied, though part of her was afraid of what they might learn. The main screen filled with the image of a human face. The creature looked old, with gray hair and lines around its eyes. According to the file, this was a human called General Marcus Thompson, a veteran of multiple conflicts. "Play the audio," Vexithera ordered. The human's voice came through the speakers, translated into Zephyrian by their computer systems. "People ask me if I enjoy war," the human said, looking directly at the camera. "That's the wrong question. You don't enjoy war. You understand it. War is like a storm, you can't control it. But you can learn to read the signs and prepare for what's coming." The crew listened in stunned silence as the human continued. "Every conflict teaches you something new. In Vietnam, we learned that superior firepower means nothing if you don't understand the terrain and the enemy's motivation. In the Gulf, we learned that technology can give you an advantage, but you still need soldiers who can think and adapt. In Afghanistan, we learned that winning battles is easy. Winning hearts and minds is the real challenge." Vexithara paused the recording. "They speak of war as if it were a subject to be studied in school." "There are hundreds of these interviews, Commander," Catherine reported. "Soldiers, generals, pilots, sailors, all discussing their experiences and what they learned from each conflict." She ordered him to play more recordings. The next was a female human who had served in something called the Marine Corps. "Combat changes you," the woman said. "Not because you enjoy killing. Most of us don't. It changes you because you learn to make decisions that other people never have to make. In 2 seconds, you decide who lives and who dies. You learn to trust your instincts, to read danger signals, to work as part of a team where everyone's life depends on everyone else." Another recording showed a young human male, barely out of adolescence by their standards. "Before my first deployment, I thought I knew what courage meant," he said. "I thought it meant not being afraid. But real courage is being terrified and doing your job anyway. It's carrying a wounded friend to safety while people are shooting at you. It's making the hard choices when there are no good options." Vexithera realized that these humans did not see warfare as something terrible that happened to them. They saw it as something that revealed their true character. "Play the file on military training," she ordered. The screen showed images of humans practicing combat in various environments. But this was not simple weapons training. The humans were learning to think like warriors. "Military training is about more than learning to use weapons," explained a human instructor. "We're teaching these soldiers to think tactically. Every situation is a puzzle to be solved. How do you approach an enemy position? How do you minimize your own casualties while achieving your objective? How do you adapt when your original plan fails?" The training videos showed humans practicing complex scenarios. They would be given a mission, then face unexpected problems that forced them to change their approach. Failed attempts were studied carefully to identify mistakes and improve performance. "Look at this," Catherine said, opening another file. "They call it wargaming. They create simulated battles to test strategies and train leaders." The screen showed humans gathered around tables covered with maps and small figures representing military units. They were playing elaborate games that simulated entire wars, trying different strategies and learning from the results. "They play games about war," asked Tactical Officer Zilnith. "Not games for entertainment," Catherine corrected. "These are serious training exercises. Look at this file. It's a simulation of an invasion of their home planet by alien forces." Vexithara felt a chill as she read the scenario. The humans had created detailed plans for defending their world against technologically superior aliens. They had considered orbital bombardment, ground invasions, and occupation scenarios. "They have planned for fighting us," she realized. "Or species like us," Catherine agreed. "Commander, they have dozens of scenarios involving contact with hostile alien civilizations. They've thought about how to fight enemies with better technology, different biology, and unknown capabilities." The strategic documents were the most disturbing of all. They showed that humans approached warfare on multiple levels simultaneously. While soldiers fought battles, politicians worked to gain allies. Scientists developed new weapons and economists managed resources to sustain long conflicts. "Look at this analysis of their Second World War," Catherine said. "They didn't just win because they had better soldiers or weapons. They won because they could produce more equipment, feed more troops, and maintain their war effort longer than their enemies." The file showed how humans had turned their entire civilization into a war machine. Factories that once made cars began making tanks. Scientists who studied physics began developing radar and nuclear weapons. Farmers increased food production to feed armies around the world. "They understand that modern war is fought by entire civilizations, not just armies," Vexithera observed. But the most chilling documents were the psychological studies. Human military scientists had carefully analyzed the mental aspects of combat. They studied fear, courage, leadership, and morale like Zephyrian scientists studied physics. This file contains studies on combat effectiveness, Catherine reported. They have identified the factors that make soldiers fight well or poorly. They know how to select individuals who will perform well under stress, how to train units to work together effectively, and how to maintain fighting spirit during long campaigns. The studies revealed that humans had learned to manipulate their own psychology for military advantage. They used music, ceremonies, and symbols to build unit cohesion. They created rivalries between different military units to improve performance. They even studied how to use fear and anger as tools to motivate soldiers. "Commander," said Dr. Welketh, the ship's xenopsychologist, "these psychological profiles suggest something very disturbing. Most species we have encountered view violence as aberrant behavior. These humans seem to view it as a normal part of existence." Vexthara looked at more files. She found training programs that taught human children about military history, educational materials that explained different types of conflicts, museums dedicated to preserving weapons and battle records. "They teach their young about warfare," she said. "It's part of their culture." "Yes, Commander. And look at this. They have an entire entertainment industry based on military themes." The screen showed images from human movies and books that depicted warfare. These were not historical records, but fictional stories created for entertainment. Humans enjoyed watching and reading about battles, even imaginary ones. "They find war entertaining?" Pelnix asked in disbelief. "Not just entertaining," Catherine replied. "Educational. These fictional works explore moral questions about warfare, analyze historical conflicts, and speculate about future battles. They use entertainment to think about war." Vexthara realized that warfare was not just something humans did. It was part of how they understood the world. They saw life as a series of conflicts to be won or lost. Competition and struggle were not unfortunate necessities, but fundamental aspects of existence. "Commander," Communications Officer Yellenth called out, "I am receiving an urgent message from the Eternal Glory. The human ship is showing increased activity." Vexthara looked at the tactical display. The human vessel's power levels were rising steadily. Weapon systems that had been dormant were coming online. "Are they preparing to attack us?" she asked. "Unknown, Commander. But their energy signatures suggest they are preparing for combat." Vexthara thought about everything they had learned. These humans had spent thousands of years learning to fight. They had studied every aspect of warfare and turned killing into an art form. They had created weapons that could destroy planets and strategies that could defeat superior enemies. And now they were getting ready to fight. "All ships raise shields and prepare defensive positions," she ordered. "But do not power weapons unless they fire first." As the Zephyrian fleet prepared for possible battle, Vexthara continued to study the human files. She found records of human soldiers who had fought against overwhelming odds and won through cleverness and determination. Stories of outnumbered forces that had defeated superior enemies by using better tactics and stronger will. "Commander," Catherine said quietly, "there is something else you should see. Their records contain detailed studies of Zephyrian military capabilities." "What do you mean?" "They have been observing us, Commander. They know about our technology, our tactics, our weaknesses. Look at this analysis." The screen showed a human military report about the Zephyrian Empire. It contained accurate information about their ships, weapons, and standard operating procedures. "How do they know all this?" Vexthara asked. "They have been watching us for some time, Commander. They have intelligence networks, spy satellites, and observation posts throughout this sector of space." The report contained detailed recommendations for fighting Zephyrian forces. It identified weak points in their ship designs, predictable patterns in their tactics, and psychological factors that could be exploited. "They have been preparing to fight us specifically," Vexthara realized. As this sobering truth sank in, the tactical display showed the human ship completing its power-up sequence. All weapons were now online, and the vessel was maneuvering into what human doctrine would call a defensive posture. The hunters had become the hunted. Captain Sarah Chen had been dreaming of home when the ship's computer woke her up. The soft chimes of the alert system pulled her from sleep, and she was instantly awake and alert. 23 years in the United Earth Navy had trained her to respond quickly to any change in her ship's status. "Computer," Report, she said as she pulled on her uniform. Captain, we have detected sustained scanning activity from unknown vessels. Duration 3 hours, 14 minutes. The scans appear to be deep penetration analysis of our systems and databases. Sarah's blood turned cold. In space, unexpected scanning was like someone breaking into your house and going through your belongings. It was either preparation for an attack or incredibly rude behavior from a species that didn't understand proper protocols. How many vessels? She asked as she hurried toward the bridge. 3 ships detected, Captain. Configuration unknown. Technology level appears significantly advanced compared to our capabilities. Sarah stepped onto the bridge of the UES Indomitable. The ship had been her home for 2 years now, and she knew every sound, every vibration, every quirk of its systems. Her crew of 123 men and women were the best Earth had to offer, trained for the specific dangers of deep space exploration. Report, she ordered as she took her command chair. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, her executive officer, turned from the tactical station. Captain, we've got 3 bogies holding position approximately 50,000 kilometers from our location. They've been scanning us for over 3 hours. The computer woke the duty crew when it detected the intrusion attempts on our databases. Intrusion attempts? Yes, ma'am. They're not just scanning our hull and systems. They're actually accessing our computer files. Sarah felt her anger rising. The Indomitable contained classified information about Earth's defenses, military capabilities, and exploration plans. Allowing unknown aliens to access that data was completely unacceptable. Lieutenant Hayes, she called to her communications officer. Any response to our standard first contact protocols? Negative, Captain. We've been broadcasting standard greeting messages for the past hour. No response. Tactical status? Lieutenant Commander Jackson checked his displays. All defensive systems online and ready. Point defense grid active. Main batteries charged but not yet targeted. Marines are armed and ready for boarding action if necessary. Sarah nodded. The crew was following standard procedures perfectly. The Indomitable was a light cruiser, designed for exploration and patrol duties rather than major combat operations. But like all human warships, it was built to fight against superior odds if necessary. Captain, called out Ensign Park from the science station, I'm analyzing their scanning methods. The technology is definitely more advanced than ours, but there are some interesting patterns. Explain. They seem to be spending a lot of time studying our tactical databases and weapon systems. Almost like they're trying to understand how we fight rather than just cataloging our technology. Sarah considered this information. In her experience, there were only 2 reasons why aliens would study human military tactics so carefully. Either they were planning to attack or they were trying to understand whether humans posed a threat to them. Time to make a decision, she said. XO, implement First Contact Protocol Omega. Jackson's eyes widened slightly. Protocol Omega was reserved for situations where unknown aliens were behaving in a potentially hostile manner. It meant treating first contact as a possible combat situation. Aye, Captain. All hands, this is the XO, set condition 1 throughout the ship. This is not a drill. All personnel to battle stations. The ship transformed around them. Blast doors sealed non-essential sections. The crew moved quickly to their combat positions. Weapon systems that had been in standby mode came fully online. The Indomitable went from exploration vessel to warship in less than 3 minutes. Captain, reported the weapons officer. All systems show green. Main batteries targeted on the largest alien vessel. Point defense grid tracking all 3 ships. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Sarah looked at the tactical display. Her ship was outnumbered 3-1, and the aliens clearly had superior technology. By conventional military thinking, the smart move would be to try to escape or surrender. But human military doctrine had been shaped by thousands of years of fighting against superior odds. Sometimes the best defense was to show potential enemies that you were prepared to fight regardless of the odds. Open a channel on all frequencies, she ordered. Channel open. Captain. Sarah stood up from her command chair and faced the main screen. She knew that her next words might determine whether humanity's expansion into space would be peaceful or violent. Unknown vessels. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Indomitable. You have been conducting unauthorized scans of my vessel for the past 3 hours and 14 minutes. This constitutes a hostile act under the military protocols of the United Earth Federation. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. You have 60 seconds to identify yourselves and state your intentions. If you do not respond, We will consider your continued presence a threat and respond accordingly. This is your only warning." On the bridge, her crew waited in tense silence. Everyone understood what the captain was doing. She was making it clear to the aliens that humanity would not be intimidated, even when facing superior forces. "Captain," whispered Lieutenant Commander Jackson, "are you sure about this? If they have better weapons, XO," Sarah replied quietly. "If we back down now, they'll think humans are weak. That will make every future encounter more dangerous. Sometimes you have to convince potential enemies that the cost of fighting you is too high, even if they might win." The seconds ticked by on the bridge chronometer. 30 seconds. 45 seconds. 55 seconds, Captain. Communications Officer Hayes called out. "We're receiving a transmission." On screen, the main display filled with the image of an alien creature. It looked somewhat like a giant spider that had learned to stand upright, with purple skin and multiple arms. When it spoke, the computer translated its words into English. "This is Fleet Commander Vexithara of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. We apologize for the unauthorized scanning. We wish to open diplomatic relations." Sarah studied the alien commander's image. She could see surprise and what might have been fear in its alien features. Good. The message had been received. "Apology accepted, Commander Vexithara. However, understand this clearly. Any future unauthorized scans will be considered an act of war. We are prepared to discuss trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and mutual defense pacts. But understand this above all else. Humanity does not kneel." There was a long pause before the alien replied. We understand, Captain Chen. We would like to begin formal diplomatic contact." "Excellent. You may approach to a distance of 10,000 kilometers. Any closer and my weapon systems will engage automatically. We'll begin with standard diplomatic protocols as soon as you transmit your credentials." As the alien ships began to move closer, Sarah turned to her crew. She could see the mixture of pride and nervousness on their faces. They had just made first contact with an alien civilization, and they had done it on humanity's terms. "Stand down from Condition 1, but maintain full readiness," she ordered. "I want all sensors focused on those ships. Any sign of aggressive movement and we go back to battle stations immediately." As her crew began the process of setting up formal diplomatic contact, Sarah reflected on what had just happened. The aliens had clearly expected humanity to be intimidated by their superior technology. They had been scanning human systems for hours, probably assuming that the primitive humans would never detect their activities. But humans had learned long ago that showing weakness to potential enemies only invited aggression. Every successful military leader in human history had understood that sometimes you had to stand up to bullies, even when they were bigger and stronger than you. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander Jackson said quietly, "that was either the bravest thing I've ever seen, or the most foolish. Sometimes there's no difference." XO, sometimes there's no difference. On the main screen, the alien ships were approaching slowly and carefully. Sarah could see that they were massive vessels, far larger and more advanced than the Indomitable, but they were approaching with obvious respect for human capabilities. "Captain," Ensign Park called out from the science station, "I'm detecting some interesting energy patterns from the alien ships. Their weapon systems are powered down, but their defensive shields are at maximum strength." Sarah smiled. The aliens were taking precautions, which meant they were treating humanity as a potential threat, rather than a primitive species to be ignored. "Maintain our current status," she ordered. "Full sensors, weapons ready but not targeted. Let them know we're watching everything they do." As the two fleets began the delicate process of first contact, Sarah knew that everything had changed. Humanity had announced its presence in the galaxy, not as a weak species begging for protection, but as a civilization prepared to defend itself and its interests. The aliens had been scanning human databases for hours, learning about humanity's long history of warfare and conflict. Now they understood that bringing superior technology to a fight against humans might not guarantee victory. The stars around them seemed different now. They were no longer empty space waiting to be explored. They were a battlefield where humanity would either earn its place among the galactic civilizations or fight to defend its right to exist. And Captain Sarah Chen was ready for either possibility. Fleet Commander Vexithara stared at the human captain's image on her main screen and realized that everything she thought she knew about the universe had changed. In her 300 years of service to the Zephyrian Empire, she had never encountered a species that responded to superior force with defiance rather than submission. "Commander," Kethrin whispered from his station. "What are your orders?" Vexthara looked around her bridge. Her crew was watching her with expressions of confusion and fear. They had spent hours learning about human warfare capabilities, and now they were facing a human warship whose captain had just threatened to fight them despite being outnumbered and outgunned. "Maintain defensive positions," she ordered. "But power down all weapon systems except point defense." "Commander," Tactical Officer Zilnith protested, "standard Imperial protocol requires us to demand surrender from inferior species." "Look at your tactical analysis, officer," Vexthara replied coldly. "Do these humans seem inferior to you?" Zilnith checked his displays and fell silent. The human ship was small and primitive by Zephyrian standards, but it was maneuvering like a veteran warship. Every movement showed tactical awareness and combat readiness. "Commander," Communications Officer Yelinth reported, "the humans are transmitting standard diplomatic protocols. They want to exchange credentials and begin formal negotiations." Vexthara nodded. "Respond with our standard diplomatic package. But make sure they understand we represent the Zephyrian Empire. 50,000 years of civilization, spanning hundreds of star systems." As her crew began the diplomatic process, Vexthara reviewed what they had learned from the deep scans. The human databases contained the complete military history of a species that had turned warfare into both art and science. But more disturbing than their tactical knowledge was their psychological profile. These humans did not see themselves as a weak species hoping for galactic protection. They saw themselves as a civilization that had earned the right to exist by surviving thousands of years of constant conflict. They approached the galaxy not as supplicants, but as equals who were prepared to fight for their place among the stars. "Commander," Kethrin called out, "I'm receiving additional data from our deep scans of their computer systems." "What kind of data?" "Strategic assessments, Commander. The humans have been studying us for some time. They have detailed intelligence on Zephyrian military capabilities, ship designs, and tactical doctrines." Vexthara felt a chill run through her body. "Show me." The screen filled with human intelligence reports about the Zephyrian Empire. The documents were frighteningly accurate. The humans knew about Imperial ship classifications, weapon capabilities, and standard operating procedures. "How did they obtain this information?" she asked. "Unknown, Commander. But their analysis is very thorough. Look at this tactical assessment." The screen showed a human military analysis of Zephyrian combat doctrine. The report identified several critical weaknesses in Imperial strategy. It noted that Zephyrian forces relied heavily on technological superiority, and rarely faced enemies willing to accept heavy casualties. It recommended using guerrilla tactics, targeting supply lines, and forcing Zephyrian forces into extended conflicts where human endurance would become an advantage. They have been planning to fight us, Vexithara realized. Yes, Commander. But not just us. They have similar analyses for every major galactic civilization. They call it contingency planning. Vexithara read more of the human documents. They contain detailed strategies for fighting various alien species, plans for defending human colonies, and scenarios for different types of interstellar conflicts. They assume the galaxy is hostile, she said. Yes, Commander. Their entire approach to space exploration is based on the assumption that they will eventually have to fight for survival. This revelation changed everything. Most species that achieved interstellar travel did so after achieving planetary peace. They explored space with scientific curiosity and hopes of finding trading partners or allies. These humans had reached the stars while still expecting to fight wars. Commander, Yellenth called out. The humans are requesting a formal meeting between senior officers. Captain Chen proposes that small delegations from both fleets meet aboard a neutral location to begin negotiations. Vexithara considered this request carefully. Standard Imperial protocol would be to demand that the aliens come aboard a Zephyrian ship to demonstrate their inferior status. But she was beginning to understand that these humans would never accept such an arrangement. Inform Captain Chen that we accept her proposal. We will establish a neutral meeting point between our fleets. As her crew made the arrangements, Vexithara thought about the implications of this first contact. For 50,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had encountered new species, and either absorbed them into the Empire, or destroyed them if they posed a threat. The choice had always been simple because no other species had possessed both the military capability and the will to fight a prolonged war against the Empire. But humans were different. They had the tactical knowledge to fight effectively against superior technology, and their psychological profile suggested they would never surrender regardless of the odds. Fighting them would be expensive and bloody, with no guarantee of victory. Commander, Dr. Welketh, the ship's xenopsychologist, approached her station. I have completed my analysis of the human psychological profiles. Your assessment? Commander, these creatures are fundamentally different from any species we have encountered. Most civilizations develop warfare as a survival tool and abandon it once they achieve security. Humans have elevated warfare to the level of philosophy. Explain. They don't just fight when necessary, Commander. They study conflict as a way of understanding existence itself. They see life as a series of challenges to be overcome through strength, cleverness, and determination. To them, the willingness to fight and die for your beliefs is the highest form of honor. Vexithara looked at the tactical display showing both fleets. The human ship was still outnumbered and outgunned, but it maintained a perfect defensive position. Its weapons were ready, its crew was alert, and its captain had made it clear that they were prepared to fight despite the odds. "What do you recommend?" she asked. "Commander, I believe we are witnessing the emergence of the first truly militaristic species to achieve interstellar travel. The humans will never accept subjugation, and they have the knowledge and determination to make any war against them extremely costly. Are you suggesting we should treat them as equals?" "I am suggesting, Commander, that we may not have a choice." The communication system chimed with an incoming message from Imperial High Command. "Commander Vexthara," came the voice of Admiral Kolshan, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet. "What is your status report on the alien contact?" Vexthara looked around her bridge. Her crew was waiting to hear how she would explain this situation to their superiors. The standard report would be simple. Primitive aliens discovered, scanning completed, integration or elimination recommended. But this situation was not standard. "Admiral," she began carefully, "we have made contact with a species that calls itself human. They possess interstellar travel capability and appear to represent a significant military force." "Military assessment?" Vexthara paused. Everything she said in the next few minutes would determine how the Empire responded to humanity. humans have developed military capabilities and tactical knowledge that rival our own. They have been observing Imperial forces and developing countermeasures to our standard tactics. Any conflict with them would result in significant Imperial casualties. There was a long silence from Imperial High Command. Commander, Admiral Kolshan's voice was cold. Are you telling me that a primitive species poses a threat to the Zephyrian Empire? Admiral, I am telling you that these humans are not primitive. They have achieved something we have never encountered. They have maintained their warlike nature throughout their technological development. They are not a species that can be easily conquered or controlled. Another long pause. What is your recommendation, Commander? Vexithara looked at the image of Captain Chen on her screen. The human woman stood calmly on her bridge, surrounded by her crew, ready to face whatever came next. She had looked directly into the face of superior alien technology and refused to back down. Admiral, I recommend we treat the humans as equals and begin formal diplomatic relations. They have resources and knowledge that could benefit the Empire. And the cost of conquering them would be prohibitively high. You are recommending diplomacy with aliens who refuse to acknowledge Imperial authority? Yes, Admiral. I believe the age of automatic Imperial dominance may be ending. These humans represent something new. A species that has the capability and the will to fight us as equals. The silence stretched on for nearly a minute
before Admiral Colshan responded. Proceed with diplomatic contact, Commander, but maintain full military readiness. If these humans prove to be as dangerous as you suggest, we may need to eliminate them before they become a greater threat. As the communication ended, Vexithara realized that she had just changed the course of galactic history. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire was treating another species as a potential equal, rather than a subject to be conquered. Commander, Yellenth called out, Captain Chen is requesting to begin formal negotiations. She says the humans are prepared to discuss trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and mutual